From the opening tip-off to the final buzzer of the big dance, this is where the madness lives. The roar of the student section, we hear it. The bracket-busting upsets, we predict them. The legends in the making, we've got the stats on lock. Whether you're a die-hard alum or a casual fan of the chaos, you're officially on the clock. This is the pulse of the court. This is the home of the hoop. And this is Hardwood Gameday. And now, the man who lives and breathes the game, here's your host, Trevor Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second to last episode of Hardwood Gameday. We're rounding the final corner of March Madness, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an interesting bracket thus far with many upsets. Seeing the 9th seed Iowa Hawkeyes make it this far up into the Elite Eight. They got some proving to do, ladies and gentlemen, but they're a few games away from doing the impossible as a 9th seed. But we got to see how things end up shaking out in the men's side of the bracket. But also, ladies and gentlemen, we are now getting into the women's Sweet 16. A little bit of their final 8 has been pictured out thus far. So we may touch those games, those women's Elite 8 games, but we'll see how much time we got today. It's a very full slate of games on the women's Sweet 16 side, and then talking about the men's Elite 8. So those are our two big topics today. If we have extra time, ladies and gentlemen, like OT, then we'll talk about the women's Elite 8. But hopefully we can get through everything and really capture what is happening on this Saturday and this Sunday as well. So a lot of good stuff going on. But make sure you go and follow ETB. We're getting close to 4,000 watch hours, ladies and gentlemen. That gets us some monetizations to help us grow our account a little bit better and be able to come up with different projects and create more opportunities for everyone here on this network. So make sure you keep watching all of our past streams and future streams coming up as we get closer to that magical number of 4,000 watch hours on YouTube. So make sure you go over and subscribe to Empty the Bench Network, ladies and gentlemen, or ETB Network, and help us reach that 4,000 hour goal that we have set for ourselves. The closer we get to it, the better off things will be. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in thus far. We have 51 people. Hopefully that number keeps climbing. And let's get the show on the road. We're going to start with the women's Sweet 16 games, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot of good ones in the slate right now in the second half of the Sweet 16 games. We got Louisville, who's a 3 seed, versus Michigan as a 2 seed. We have Kentucky as a 5 seed versus Texas as a 1 seed. And then you have Oklahoma as a 4 seed versus South Carolina, who's been having a fantastic year across the board, as a 1 seed. And then you have Virginia as a 10 versus TCU as a 3, ladies and gentlemen. What a matchup we got in the women's Sweet 16. I think we got a good key front runners of what's going on. But let's dive into the first game that we're going to talk about here, ladies and gentlemen, is Michigan versus Louisville. The 3 seed versus the 2 seed today at 12:30 Eastern time. So a little past 90 minutes left before tip-off, ladies and gentlemen, and it's going to be on ABC, ladies and gentlemen, so make sure you tune into that. Right now, Michigan is a 63% chance to win this game compared to Louisville's 36.8% chance, ladies and gentlemen. But from the field, I think, is what's going to drive a lot of this argument back and forth. Both teams have been playing relatively tough competition, but if we look at all things leading up, Michigan has been dominating their opponents in the round of 64 and the round of 32. They played North Carolina State and won 92-63, very convincing margin. And they beat, I want to say it's High Point? No, Holy Cross, ladies and gentlemen, Holy Cross. Michigan destroyed Holy Cross 83-48, ladies and gentlemen. So that's a good margin right there. They got their tune-up games in, and now they have to take on Louisville. Very difficult matchup. Louisville had a very own president, I would say, things to take care of. They had to go up against Vermont, won by 20 points, 72-52. And they beat Alabama by 1, ladies and gentlemen. So they had that battle tested coming down to the wire, winning 69-68 in a great fashion of a basketball game in the round of 32. Now, as them being a 3 seed and going up against a 2, a lot of the stat line is going to be somewhat similar across the board in this one, ladies and gentlemen, between Louisville and between Michigan on top of that, ladies and gentlemen. So if you look at on the average points per game for both of these squads, Michigan's kind of like averaging about 84 points per game on average this season compared to Louisville's 79 points a game. Points against on the defensive side, relatively similar, where Louisville gives up about almost 61 compared to Michigan's 62.5. So relatively in the same ballpark about points being given up. So defense on that front is relatively similar. Field goal percentage, Michigan slightly higher with 47% compared to Louisville's 46. So we're going to see how the shooting plays out today. And as I preach the gospel and all of Hardwood Game Day and March Madness is make your free throws, and that will dictate how things unfold for you all. But also, ladies and gentlemen, rebounds are about the same with about 41 for Louisville and Michigan about 40.5 right now. Assist margin about the same, about 17 for both squads. And blocks, Michigan has, I should say, the block party. Michigan has 3.5 compared to Louisville's 3. And steals, Michigan likes to steal the ball, so they're going to try to create turnovers in this one to create the margin that they need, because Michigan averages about 11 steals a game compared to Louisville's 9. But if you see where these two schools kind of rank within the scenario, Louisville is the second best team in the ACC, and they their overall conference record, ladies and gentlemen, was 15-3, and with an overall record of 29-7. Now, Michigan, ladies and gentlemen, they are in the same boat. They, had to go deal with UCLA, who was the coveted 1 seed, 18-0 in conference and 34-1 in overall play. Michigan has similar conference record to Louisville, which was 15-3. And Michigan's overall record was 27-6, ladies and gentlemen. So the game plan for Michigan here is take advantage of your steals and capitalize on them as best you can in this game and drive certain certain points home about your team. Try to create more blocks, but that's not your specialty. It's the turnovers, and trying to get fast break points off of those turnovers will kind of drive it. If you even look at their last few games, in the tournament, it's that margin of victory. Once they get that margin, they are tough to beat. But Louisville has that battle test. If they keep that margin close, there's a chance where Louisville can fight back. But we'll see, because both of these two teams are respectable in their conference right now, sitting in second place on overall. But in the Sweet 16, nothing's sweeter, and it's going to be bittersweet when you lose, but also it could be possibly bittersweet when you win, when you should win by more, but you end up falling short across that goal line. But we'll see what happens. This game, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, the 3 seed of Louisville versus Michigan as a 2 seed, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 a.m. Pacific Time on ABC, ladies and gentlemen. So here we go, and more of the women's side of things. For our next topic, we're looking at, just going to make some adjustments, about Kentucky versus Texas, a 5 seed versus a 1 seed. A lot of the margins of the 1 seed for the women's, how I would say, are strong contenders to win the title. But it's just trying to see how they get through the tournament. But this game here, ladies and gentlemen, is 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time on ABC, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, a lot of good stuff happened on ABC today. But then our other half of the Sweet 16 is going to be on ESPN. So if we look at Texas this year, ladies and gentlemen, Texas has a 33-3 overall conference record. What a season that they've been having. They've been finding ways to make things happen. Kentucky, on the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, 25-10. So very, very, very difficult across the board. I mean, looking at, their overall stats in like the round of, 64 and 32. I mean, Texas has been on the assault, I would say. They have knocked out Missouri State 87-45. Then they go to Oregon and they just bushwhacked them 158. Like, this Texas squad is just blowing teams out of the water, and they're trying to contend for the title. Like, they're on the caliber of looking like a South Carolina or a UCLA based on how aggressive they are. And we even saw in March when they last played South Carolina, they won 78-61. So, like, this Texas team is hot right now, ladies and gentlemen. So if you really want to put your money where your mouth is and do like a money line bet, like, Texas might be a good choice from the last two games from what we've seen. And they're most likely could hit the spread, because right now the spread is minus 14.5 for Texas right now, ladies and gentlemen. So that's very, very good from the last, margins of victory. However, Kentucky gets by West Virginia by the slither of their teeth. They get through 74-73, and they knock out James Madison 71-56. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what Kentucky's dealing with. They have been having a rocky start, and even on top of that, they did play South Carolina, and Kentucky lost to South Carolina 87-64. So, like, if you're looking at a comparison, like, Texas is favored by a long shot, or I should say by a Longhorn. You see what I did there? But, ladies and gentlemen, that's one of those things you gotta focus on. That it's just the margin, the aggressiveness that Texas has. Like, Texas is the second best team in the SEC, and Kentucky is probably about like the sixth best team in the, I would say, SEC. You got South Carolina 1, Texas 2, Vanderbilt 3, LSU 4, Oklahoma 5, and Kentucky 6. That's the margin that's sitting on top of them right now. And Kentucky's overall record was 8-8 in the conference. So, like, they were a 500 team in the conference, not too deadly. But when you're 6 back and didn't even hit double digits in wins, that's when you know there's an elite section in the SEC right now where they have just been queens of the basketball court in the women's side of the bracket. So, definitely you got to focus on that for sure. But if you look at the margins, I mean, we're going to see if we can find, like, yesteryear's game, I can say. See if I can find that to help me out. But like I said, Texas's game plan, creating that tempo when they need to do it the most. And just got to find the last time that they played Kentucky, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like back in February. And Texas won 64-53. So if we open that up just to see how they played last game, the margin says it all. Kentucky in the first quarter when they played was 19-23 Texas. Second quarter is where teams I've noticed started to break down. I saw that during the Ohio State women's tournament. Like, second quarter teams just break down across the board. On top of that, but also you can think about how the third quarter ended up playing out and coming through at 13-10, ladies and gentlemen, in the third quarter, and you round things out in the fourth quarter on the lines of pulling through with a 12-16 kind of fourth quarter when the last time they played each other. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the stat line of that last game, Texas shot 46% from the field compared to Kentucky's 39%. On top of that, you have the three-point shooting for that game was Texas with 21%. They shot 14 threes and ended up getting 3 of those, where Kentucky, on the other hand, was 16 to 14 on top of that. So 43% from the 3-point line, but free throws, ladies and gentlemen, that's where it kind of hurt Kentucky in that one. 58% from the free throw line, which was 11 from 19, and Texas was 17 for 22 with a 77% overall from the free throw line. Turnovers played a factor in it. Kentucky had 23, Texas had 16. Rebounds were about the same, between 30 for Kentucky and 29 for Texas, but Texas led majority of that game for the most part, ladies and gentlemen. So definitely one of those things that I don't think you're going to see too much shifting going on, but it's going to encapsulate what's going to happen today for the most part on top of that. So I like Texas in this one. I think it's going to be a very decisive win, but we'll see. I mean, they dropping over 100 points in round of 32. I think they're really on a great clip to do really, really well in women in the round of 16 going into the Elite Eight possibly. Next, let's dive into Oklahoma and South Carolina, ladies and gentlemen. Oklahoma and South Carolina, it's one of those matchups where you have to keep a close eye to see how things are shaking out. Definitely a key matchup that we're looking here. Both teams been in the SEC, but South Carolina's on top, and Oklahoma's the 5th best team in the SEC. I mean, just looking at a common opponents, Oklahoma had I would say, interesting ride in the tournament thus far. They took on Idaho, University of Idaho, I want to say, and they won in a good fashion of 89 to 59, and Michigan State winning that one 77 to 71 on top of that. But I mean, it's very tough when Oklahoma ended up losing to LSU 112 to 78. And so it's very, very difficult to picture what's going to end up happening when South Carolina kept LSU at bay majority of the time. Because LSU in that game kind of shook themselves out. It was 83 to 77 in that fashion, ladies and gentlemen. So it's with that. But then South Carolina did lose to Texas in a 78-61 fashion. So outside of that, South Carolina women have been on a hot streak this tournament. They went to, I think, Southern and beat them down basically 103 to 34. And then they played USC, dropped another 101 to 61. So literally, South Carolina is on a campaign for this title. And once we get the clash of the heavyweights for maybe a possibly Texas versus South Carolina matchup, it's going to be a final that we're going to remember. We're going to have the storyline set up, but hey, this is where you get to the best of the best in the women's tournament. You have the teams that try to compete with the top, but then the top shows why they are the tops. Like I said, the queens of the court, and they will fight tooth and nail to be able to be on the podium to cut down that net and saying that they are a national champion. But this game, ladies and gentlemen, you can catch at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, ladies and gentlemen. But this is a 4 seed going against a 1 seed, so the matchup is going to be very close, very tight-knit. But based on how South Carolina is playing, I think the spread is going to hold true to minus 17.5 or somewhere within that ballpark. I don't think Oklahoma will be able to close in that gap that well, ladies and gentlemen. Rounding things out in the Sweet 16 for the women's, ladies and gentlemen, it is Virginia, numbered as a 10 seed, going up against TCU. So it looks like we got some Big 12 action and the ACC. Right now, TCU is looking relatively favored in this matchup, very strong favor with a 77% chance to win this game. However, you have Virginia with a 22.9% chance to win. And how we look at it, ladies and gentlemen, the spread is minus 8.5 in favor of TCU right now. Stat lines, I mean, looking at the last games in the tournament, TCU is a little bit on the troublesome because they went to Washington in overtime and how to end up winning that game 62-59 and that one in OT. But Virginia has been battling out in OT left and right. They knocked off Georgia 82-73 and knocked off Iowa, the Lady Hawkeyes, who have been great all year. And I would say great all year, but solid all year. Knocked them off in overtime 83-72. I shouldn't say overtime. 2 overtimes to beat the Iowa Hawkeye team. So this Virginia team is a dark horse. I don't think you should take them, underestimate them. But the extra minutes in the overtime, does that catch up to them in this game? Even though TCU had an overtime game of their own and got that out, one starts to think playing those extra minutes are going to catch up to your players. When that catches up to your players, it makes it difficult for them to recover in such a short time span. I know there's a lot of trainers out there that can get the players back up to their ability to get back and be ready for this game today. It's granted that it is a 7:30 tip-off on the Eastern Standard Time, but also 4:30 on the West Coast where that stands. So it's going to be a tough thing to witness, to see, does Virginia's legs give out from all the overtime that they have thus far? So Virginia averages about 75 points a game compared to TCU's 77. Defense, TCU has the better defense right now, ladies and gentlemen, with about 56 points given up. And Virginia, ladies and gentlemen, about 65, we'll just round up, 65 points given up. But the field goal percentage, ladies and gentlemen, is starting to come back, 47-44. But from what it looks like, a lot of teams with the higher field goal percentage in the women's tournament thus far tend to do very well about winning majority of the games. But we'll see if that theory holds true. Because now, if that holds true, are we going to get to a point where we can get a perfect bracket in the women's side at some point? I think compared to the men's and women's, I think there's probably a higher chance for someone to get a perfect bracket in the women's bracket right now in this day and age before we get to a field where it's upsets are happening left and right. That's where we're at with the men. Like, you don't know where the upsets are. You know, for a 5 and 12 seed, at least one of the 12 seeds pulls up the upset. That's the thing you have to figure out about the men. The women, it's like, all right, based on the teams, we're going to see a few teams get out. But then the round of 32 gets a little bit gray where the higher seeds might blunder a little bit. For example, Ohio State was a 3 seed, Notre Dame was a 6 seed, and Notre Dame won. So, like, getting out of the round of 64, you still got your perfect brackets. Round of 32 is tricky because the higher seeds start to blunder. Rebounds, I would say, are about the same. Virginia about 42 and TCU almost about 42. Assists about the same with 17. And block party, ladies and gentlemen, you got about 6 blocks for Virginia and TCU about 5. And then steals about almost the same, where Virginia averages about 8 steals a game compared to TCU's 7 steals a game, ladies and gentlemen. So that's where we have the rounding out of the women's Sweet 16 matchup, where you can catch Virginia as a 10 seed versus TCU as a 3 seed, ladies and gentlemen. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN. Now, let's start diving in to the Elite 8. I would say the first half of, I would say, the men's side of the Elite Eight. Did I forget one of the games? I certainly did. And that would be the Duke versus UConn match. Oh, I have that one. Oh, it's Purdue versus Arizona. I need to go get that one, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with me as I get that situated. But yes, we're talking about the men's Elite Eight right now. The men's Elite Eight, I would say, has panned out. One of my brackets, I still have all my possible Final Four teams still alive in my second bracket, which I start picking against the first bracket that I had, and then I made a third bracket while I was waiting for my car to be serviced at the car dealership. And that bracket, it's still hanging on. I would complain where that is at, but just to give you a frame of reference, I'm just gonna share the max points I got for each bracket that's still fighting on for its life. But after Houston went down, it kind of derailed a lot of my bracket. I should say brackets. But I mean, for our network here, ladies and gentlemen, I've kind of maxed out most of my points. I got 600 points right now out of 760. So that bracket's basically done at this point. I need teams to lose like Arizona. Another bracket that I'm in with some friends, my max is still at 1630. So that one's still trucking away because I still got teams fighting for the spot for the Final Four. So if those things turn out, there's a chance that I kind of walk out with as a dub and a huge victory. But we'll see how that shakes out. And then I have another bracket with some friends, which I'm in the car dealership, which is at 1410 right now for a possibility to win that one. So we're all looking good right now. Just need some crazy things to happen, and I could possibly be a 3 bracket champion. But from the looks out of it, I might be possibly one of my brackets win, which would be great. If not, it is what it is. But the goal, as I name my brackets, it's the king of the table, which is what we like, what we got going on. But yes, the tournament that we have thus far, ladies and gentlemen, the men's side of the bracket. You got the 9th seed, Iowa. They've been sneaky all tournament long. Illinois, 3 as a 3 seed, looking good. Then you have Purdue versus Arizona as a 2-1 matchup. Tennessee has been an interesting 6 seed, creating so much problems for a lot of teams. Do they slay Michigan and get the job done? And then we have the blue-blooded of UConn as a 2 seed versus Duke. So like this Elite 8 matchup, ladies and gentlemen, has implications to be something good, something special on top of that. On top of that, just trying to get things set up for that. But let's just dive into it right now. Let's take a first look at Iowa and Illinois. Some Big Ten action. A lot of Big Ten teams right now in the Elite Eight, which we like, but you hate to see them go up against each other because you kind of want your conference to do well on top of that. But Illinois is a huge favorite. They knocked off Purdue. They've been fighting teams relatively close. Iowa has just been lurking. Iowa's 24-12. Illinois is 27-8. Chance to win in the matchup predictor on ESPN has Illinois winning it 74.9, almost 75, compared to Iowa's 25%. That's the best way to really break it down for you, ladies and gentlemen. But, I mean, just looking at the stats and matchups, Illinois was the 4th best team in the Big Ten. And Iowa sitting in the middle of the road, conference record 10-10. Not looking too great in the Big Ten, middle of the road, but they have turned it on. in this bracket, ladies and gentlemen. They have turned it on. I'm trying to see if I can see the last time that these two schools played each other. But if we're looking at the common opponents, they both played Maryland. And that's the number that is a little bit of a head scratcher because Iowa won 75-64. However, Illinois only won by 6, 78-72. So that's where where all things are looming right now. But the margin of victory for Illinois has been pretty significant. They beat VCU 75-55, and they knocked off Houston and they 65-55, and they knocked off Penn 105-70. So like they're keeping that margin there. Versus Iowa, they played Clemson, won 67-61, knocked off Florida 73-72, and then beat Nebraska 71-77. Let me see if I can find the matchup. Yes. So last time they played each other was on January. I want to say before I go any further. Last time they played each other was on January 11th. And that matchup was in favor of Illinois, winning that by 75-69. So breaking this game down, you got to see what ended up happening. In the first half, Illinois was up 35-24. However, Iowa did try to make a siege, but it wasn't enough. Illinois got 40 points in the second half compared to Iowa's 45. From the field, Illinois shot 28 for 57 with a 49% from the field, and Iowa was 27 for 66. So the field goal percentage still shows when you shoot well, you win. That's how it's broken down. Now, we did have a few anomalies this season where that wasn't the case, but then you also got to look at the shot selection taken, how many shots you attempted, and all that stuff. Threes, about the same, where Illinois shot 10 for 28 for a 36% from the 3-point line, and Iowa was 29 for 31% from the 3-point line. However, ladies and gentlemen, Iowa was able to get 100% from the free throw line. Give them a round of applause back in January for shooting 100% from the free throw line. I have not seen much like that, but keep in mind, they only shot 6 for 6 from that free throw line. A lot of players can make 6 for 6 free throws. Now, if we look at Illinois, they were 9 for 11, which was an 82% from the free throw line. Turnovers, minimum turnovers, but you got 12 for Illinois and 8 for Iowa. Rebounds, 38-31. Majority of the game was led by by Illinois, and then the lead margin was 18. So that kind of will put the nail in the coffin for this game, ladies and gentlemen. This is at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Time. 3:09 p.m. Pacific Time on TBS and on True TV. So you can catch your 9 versus 3 seed. Now let's go into the next part of the bracket, what we got cooking here. Just doing a few screen tab cleanup. But you got Purdue, Big Ten, trying to get back, trying to win a title. It's been quite some time. They are sick and tired of people of Indiana talking about Indiana football and them winning a national championship. Purdue's going to be like, hold your butter biscuits. We're going to win the basketball title. And you used to call yourself a basketball school. That's what we're talking about right now. The magnitude of this game for Purdue is going to derail a lot of brackets right now. And does it derail a lot of people? Yes, it will derail brackets. Like, I do want to see Arizona lose, but I also need Arizona to win. It's very, very tough where I kind of have this stance. Like, I want the absolute chaos because I want to win my brackets because that's how it feels. But I know if they don't win, I lose in my bracket network here. So for the most part, I'll take second place in this bracket and in this on this network. I'll take it. And that just gets me a step closer to maybe next year winning this bracket and then maybe having that dream of a perfect bracket that we all so long for. Because the day that someone gets the perfect bracket, they will forever be on ESPN the next season and they will be TV interviewed and be like, hey, how'd you figure out the perfect bracket? They're going to be on Saturday Night Live and it's just going to be the average person where they like saying, oh, I just randomly picked it and there was no strategy behind it and it just happened. That's what's going to happen, and everyone's going to be disappointed. They want some type of algorithm to figure it out and possibly like an AI to figure it out, but you can't. No matter how much stats you put into it, what information you give the AI, I don't think we're going to see a perfect bracket in the men's ever. And the day we get close to it, that person is probably going to get flown out to the Final Four and see the finals, and if they're all on the cutting edge and they win, it'll be the greatest story ever written. It'll probably be a 30 for 30 on how they figured it out. But back to this game. Purdue with a 37% chance to win. Arizona's 63% chance to win. I don't know how to best describe it. Arizona 35-2. Purdue 30-8. I mean, Purdue is not the best team in the Big Ten, but they have one of the best overall records in the conference. Purdue was only 13 for 7 in the Big Ten. But when you look at Arizona, they're on the top. They were 16-2. They were a threat. And Purdue, you don't know what you're going to get from this Purdue squad. When you just look at their March Madness runs, they've been, I kind of say, outside of the round of 64, which was 104-77, they were averaging about 79 points a game. They knock off Miami with that, 79-69, and they knock off Texas, 79-77. That is Purdue right now. Now, if you look at Arizona, their round of 64, 92-58, Utah State, 78-66. And now this is where the gas jets start to turn on for Arizona. 109-88. Woo! That's the best way to describe that. That is this Arizona team coming out, being feisty, being scrappy to find a way to win this game. The margins there for Arizona. They just got to shoot well from the field today. And the game is theirs. It's all about the mindset and how you shoot and your free throws. I'm going to keep preaching the free throws. And the day we get ETB merch, I guarantee you I'm going to try to work on design a free throw shirt. It's just going to have the free throw line on the shirt. I'm saying, make your free throws. I don't know. We'll go to the drawing boards. It might be a coffee mug. That might be better. Or a little tumbler glass like this. That works too. It says make your free throws. We just got to get creative on that front. But I mean, even looking at the last 5 games, Purdue beat Michigan convincingly, 80-72, knocking off UCLA, 73-66. I mean, Purdue has notable wins, and they're on a nice hot streak right now. Field goal percentage, they're about the same. They're about 50% on average this season across the board. Both teams do score a lot of points. Purdue about 82 compared to Arizona's 86. On top of that, however, you break down the points against the defense. These teams struggle with defense. Purdue gives up about 70 points per game. And Arizona is about 69 points per game. Like, that's how close their points are getting up. But they're shooting well. So teams who shoot bad, they get left behind, and that's how they end up losing. Now, you have the rebounds of the game, 35 to 42. So Arizona likes to rebound. So that's how they get the putbacks and second chance points, which probably swings a lot of their games in their favor, which is why their margin's like that. Assist, about 20 for Purdue and about almost 17 for Arizona. The block party goes to Arizona with about 4, almost 4.5. Purdue, 3. Steals a game. Arizona likes to steal the ball a little bit more with 7 steals compared to Purdue's 5.5. That's where that game's lying out, ladies and gentlemen. I think Arizona's the better team. They're going to get this job done. But Purdue's trying to make a statement. They're trying to get to the Final Four, if not win this whole darn tournament. And the field is theirs for the taking. They just got to act like it. They got to find a way to win. And they got to capitalize when they can capitalize. And they might be okay in this game. But you can catch the number 2 seed Purdue versus number 1 seed Arizona, 8:49 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:49 p.m. Pacific Time on TBS and on True TV. Now let's dive in to Tennessee and Michigan. What a game, what a game. Tennessee trying to be the team, not America's sweetheart like Iowa is, but trying to derail Michigan as best they possibly can, as Michigan's the top of the Big Ten, and Tennessee is not in the SEC. Tennessee is 11-7 on the record for the conference, but their overall chance to win this game, ladies and gentlemen, is 31% compared to Michigan's 63% chance to win this game. You got to focus on how good this Michigan team is. They're 34-3 compared to Tennessee's 25-11. With what's going on in Michigan football, the university needs this national championship for the men's basketball program. This is what they really, really need to have happen. But with what's going on, like, Michigan has a lot of distractions on right now. And their men's basketball team has been doing well. It's like our football team has the scandals of a lifetime, from the sign stealing to Shadur Moore's situation and all that stuff. Like, winning this national championship for the university feels like it lifts things up. And as Dave Portnoy would say, getting back to the Michigan way of things, the Michigan men, as he likes to say. But it's going to be a good one. And I know Zane just chimed in. Thank you so much. He's going to be at the Michigan-Tennessee game. So, Zane, send us pictures and the ETB channel to give us all the insight and all the scoop of how that game ends up unfolding in that matchup for sure. But Michigan, what they need to do in this one is dominate the field goal percentage. They're 51% all season compared to Tennessee's 47%. Michigan likes to shoot the ball a lot, almost about 88 points per game compared to Tennessee's 79. Points against about the same, 69 almost to 70 for both schools. Rebounds about the same, Tennessee about 42.5, and Michigan about 40. Assists about the same because Tennessee has about 17, and then Michigan has about 18. Block party goes to Michigan. So we're going to see a lot of good blocks in that game to figure out how that ends up shaking itself out. Michigan has about 6 blocks per game, and then Tennessee has about almost 4 blocks Then the steals. Tennessee is going to be scrappy today in this one. About 7 steals on average per game compared to Michigan's 5.5 in the slate. So, I mean, last few games that these two schools had, Howard for Michigan, 101-80. Then against St. Louis, 95-72, beating Alabama, also 90-77. Tennessee, I thought they were going to lose to Miami of Ohio because Miami of Ohio was a good Cinderella to be picked for a possible upset like Tennessee. But they secured business with 78-56, knocked off Virginia, 79-72, and then beating Iowa State 76-62. So that is what we're looking at for this matchup. It's going to be interesting for sure. But do we see a 1-seat fall? Do we see brackets bust tomorrow on Sunday at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time? Oh gosh, that is not the right time. That does. I am sorry. Let me fix the banner on that one, ladies and gentlemen. That should be a 11 a.m., not 11:15 p.m. Pacific time. You would just be watching a replay at that point. There we go. We got that banner fixed for you guys. So now you have the latest and greatest of where that game is going to be shown and posted. And now the blue bloods of the scenario. Number 2, UConn versus number 1, Duke. 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time and 2:05 p.m. Pacific Time on CBS tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. What a way to kick off Sunday for this matchup. Like, I like it. We like it. The whole country likes it. To me, this is the Final Four, if not the final, how it should be. But we're in the Elite Eight, and only the best of the best can come out of the Elite Eight. Duke has been having phenomenal years, same with UConn. But then you look at the strength of competition. UConn normally gets through with a good record. But this scenario, you got 2 freight trains going at it. And Duke needs to find a way to not have the eyes bigger in their stomach in this scenario. If they get in their head and not treat UConn with disrespect, they might lose. But Duke has been playing with their food the entire tournament, like almost losing to Siena in that one. They were trailing. They took them for granted, won 71-65, beat TCU 81-58, but then almost lose to St. John's, but win by 5. That one came down to the wire. Yeah, I liked St. John's for a possible upset. Like they were the team as a 5th seed that had a good squad that can make a deep run. And yeah, they were, like I said, they were a Sweet 16 team. But when you go against a blue blood like a Duke and they have a good squad going up, it's kind of tough to beat them. And it's a mindset. But like St. John's was close. Like when there was about 6 minutes left in that game, the game was relatively close from that point. So will St. John's have a team next year like that? I don't know. But UConn is also in the same boat. They almost lost to Michigan State, but they probably had a good margin, which was 67-63. And then they played UCLA, won 73-55. And then you have, what am I looking? Furman winning that one 82-71. But then keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, UConn lost to St. John's before going into March Madness. And that was 72-52. They lost by 20. So with that mindset, the edge of Duke winning it out looks great right now. The question is, does it destroy the journey? Is it enough to end all things to destroy UConn's hopes, dreams, aspirations of getting another title? Or does Duke find a way to win a title without Coach K? That's where we're looking at. The storyline between this game is a great night game leading into the night. Like, this is a game that could be an ESPN classic. That's the magnitude of this game right now. Like, I can't describe how good this game is right now. How good this game is. But I want to just think about it. UConn finding a way to get through it all. I picked UConn in one of my brackets to win. And I think that was my second bracket. And there's a chance that it does happen, which makes it more worthwhile to even talk about. And as we do have enough time a little bit today, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about also, before I start going on that tangent, but let's take a look at the Women's Elite Eight. Like I said, you can catch this game Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:05 p.m. Pacific Time on CBS. So UConn as a 2 and Duke as a 1. But keep in mind, on the Women's Elite Eight side, ladies and gentlemen, Duke and UConn's women's team are also in that topic of discussion. So let's dive into that as well, because we got enough time to talk about the Women's Elite Eight in the last 9 minutes of the second to last Hardwood game day before we round out the craziness of March Madness. So we have Duke as a 3 seed versus UCLA as a 1 seed on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time and on noon Pacific on ABC. And then the other one is Notre Dame, who's a 6 seed, versus UConn as a 1 on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time on ABC. So let's dive into the Duke game a little bit. As I know, when you have your both schools in the March Madness this far into the tournament with Elite Eight implications, like, I guarantee you, whatever the men do on Sunday, like, the women probably going to be like, all right, we got to show up and we got to ball out in this scenario. And that's how it's going to start writing itself down as a great rendition. I mean, this UCLA women's team has been just dominant. We're talking 34-1, like, only losing one game, this UCLA women's team. Like, they're dominating the boards with 51%, averaging 85 points a game. Duke is about almost 74.5 points against, 59. UCLA about 57. Duke from the field is 44. Rebounds about the same, with about in the 40s. Assists, UCLA has great ball movement with 22 assists compared to Duke's 17. Blocks, Duke's gets more blocks with 6 compared to UCLA's 4. And steals, relatively close, 9 steals a game for Duke, and UCLA is about 5.8. But you just see the magnitude. UCLA has just been dominating teams. They beat up on Minnesota. They got 80-56. Knocked out Oklahoma State 87-68. And then beating California Baptist and 96-43. Just a great run that this UCLA women's team has. However, Duke women knocked off LSU in a close barn burner of 87-85. And then you have Baylor and knocking off Baylor 69-46. And then capping things off against Charleston 81-64. So that's what we got right here. This magnitude of a game, I think UCLA got it. I think they have a special team to really make a dent for a national title appearance and go to the Final Four. I like this matchup 100% in this one. And now let's take a look at the last game that we're going to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen, is Notre Dame as a 6 seed. And the crazy thing is, I saw them in person, and now they're in the Elite Eight. Wow. Just wow. I saw how they play. They have size, Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a big girl in the center, and she can do work, but she didn't have a lot of legs or stamina. She got pulled out relatively early in a lot of that game. Like, she started out probably at least maybe like 3.5 minutes in the first quarter, and then got pulled and really didn't come back until the second half. So there was a lot of stamina, but also I'm like thinking the coach was probably saving her for Ohio State when they needed it to control and dealing with tempo and size. But when you have size in women's basketball, it does play a factor. It does play an impact on how a lot of the competition views that team. And that's how that Notre Dame squad played. Like, they know how to create steals and create turnovers and play. They didn't really play with the press in their first opening round. But, I mean, what are you really going to do? Like, UConn is 37-0 for the women. 37-0. It's unheard of from trying to go to that point. Yes, I've seen women's team that, had 3 losses and all that stuff. But this is an undefeated season for UConn that we're talking about that's on the line. They beat North Carolina 63-42, knocked off Syracuse 98-45, beat UTSA 90-52. And then you have Notre Dame beating Vanderbilt 67-64, knocking off Ohio State by 10, 83-73, and beating Fairfield 79-60. That's what we're talking about. And UConn's a better team. Even though Notre Dame has some great matches, some great wins, but the pure dominance of this UConn team, I got to give it to UConn here across the board, ladies and gentlemen. UConn is the better team and most likely to close things out and get to the Final Four to round everything out today. So that's where we're at today, ladies and gentlemen. We hit about 103 people tuning in today. Great numbers, great turnout. We love everyone who tuned in to watch the second to last show of Hardwood Gameday before we round out next week as we talk about the finals and Final Four matchups that happened. So all thrilled about that, going through all that, but also want to talk for like the remaining 2 minutes about my March Madness experience. I mean, going into in Columbus, I like it. The atmosphere of the round of 64. Great home field advantage for the women for Ohio State. I was shocked about the number of fans that didn't stick around for the Notre Dame game, because I thought Notre Dame would travel well, and it's just a big brand like that. But there was some empty seats, and I was like, but this is Notre Dame. Like, you would still see fans show up because it's Notre Dame. Like, I feel like it wouldn't matter the sport because it's Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame football is one thing, and probably Notre Dame men's basketball is another thing. But you would think, like, since South Bend is relatively close to Columbus, you thought there would be more people traveling out for that game. But, I had for the ticket prices that I paid to get in. I mean, for myself, one ticket was only $41, and that included tax and fees. So, like, that's not bad for a round of 64. I mean, like, the men, it's like maybe 170, give or take, depending on the round of 64 and how the matchups shake out. But, like, a round of 64 in the women, like, if you really enjoy sports and you just want a good atmosphere and just sit there and watch, women's sports is a good time to sit there and invest in. Like, you still get your beverages in. You can still see the games that they have streaming on. Now, granted, I saw like the Ohio State game during the day, so we didn't have, the Jumbotron flipping back and forth between games. But once we got to the second game, like, they started doing that for us. But it's one of those things, like, go out and support the small markets teams. Go out and support your women's teams. Like, if it's a Saturday night and there's a women's volleyball going on for that college, just go. Have a good time. Or also, like, if there's a professional volleyball team in your area, go out and watch them. Same with women's soccer. If your city has a women's soccer team, go out and support them. Like, you don't have to go out and, buy a jersey or something, but your attendance shows value to those women and those players in those small markets. Because without you guys showing up, who are they playing for? Like, they're playing for the love of the game, but they're also playing for those that care about the sport and seeing them grow and develop. So make sure you do your best to go out and support the local markets and always support local business where you can. And that's kind of how I'm going to conclude things for today. So go out and support local businesses today. Help everyone, because I would say things need that support right now where we are. But also go out and have some fun today. Watch some great women's Sweet 16s. Watch the men's Elite 8 and women's Elite 8 games coming up. And we'll catch you here next time. But before I close out, make sure you watch other ETB shows so we can get closer to our 4,000 watch hours, ladies and gentlemen. And also subscribe to the ETB network on our YouTube channel so we can get higher views and more shares so we can help reach other people as well. Thank you so much in watching today's episode of Hardwood Game Day. So long for now. Bye-bye.